Hey everyone, I'm Cary Smith and I'm sitting here with Cheri Turner.
Hi, everyone.
And Cheri and I are both with Client First Capital. And Cheri, today we're talking about the first 5 years of retirement. So you've done the planning, you saved the money, you met with your financial planner or visited websites or whatever your process is, right? You've been getting yourself ready for retirement. Um, but this video is more about, okay, well then what happens next, right? In that, what does that transition process look like? And this is when we form new habits. We make, or at least the money decisions that we make could be compounded throughout our retirement. So we want to be careful. And then, also you begin to have a new identity that takes shape. And I don't pretend to be an expert in this area, but although I am still working with Client First Capital, I am mostly retired. I retired about 2.5 years ago. And so I've gone through this transition. I'm still in that first 5 years and still learning through it. But it's been enlightening for me as throughout my career, I've helped so many people plan for retirement, to actually be going through it myself. And so, but we have several things that that we're going to talk about today. So I think spending is maybe one of the first things, and I'll let you kick us off.
Right. So the first thing, and one of the things that a lot of people often think of is, managing the money, right? So the first consideration is your income drawdown strategy. So after decades of saving, it's a little difficult sometimes to switch to spending the money. It can feel strange. There's a psychological shift that happens when you go from earning and accumulating to now withdrawing and decumulating. Some people feel guilty and others are afraid they're going to run out. And that's why it's so important to have a clear withdrawal strategy. You might have heard of the 4% rule, and that's a guideline that suggests that you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually throughout retirement. But that's really just a starting point. Many retirees benefit from what we call a bucket strategy, where you have one bucket for short-term and more liquid cash assets, and then another for your longer-term invested assets. This approach really helps to balance liquidity, income, and your risk. But here's the catch. Your withdrawal order and the timing can dramatically affect your outcome. This is what we've referred to before as the sequence of return risk. If the market drops early in your retirement and you're withdrawing funds at the same time, it can really reduce the longevity of your portfolio. So that's why the early years of retirement are so crucial to get right.
A lot of good points in there, Cheri. You and I had a conversation recently about that 4% rule and how it's a good rule, right? It's a rule of thumb.
Right.
But anytime that you take a rule of thumb or a general rule and you apply it to everyone, it's going to fail sometimes.
Yes.
And this is an area really where those spending guardrails really need to be customized, person by person. Everyone's retirement's different. Everyone's spending's different, right? Longevity, all of those things can be different. And this is an area where it really takes some good customization to make sure that a person is, one, living the retirement that they want, and two, their assets will last throughout their lifetime.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Another thing that we look at under the financial component are tax considerations, because let's face it, your taxes don't retire when you do. In fact, smart tax planning in retirement can really help you stretch your savings further. So what's the order of operations for withdrawing from different accounts? Well, it depends. Generally, many retirees start with their taxable accounts, then move to their IRAs, and then save Roth withdrawals for later. But exceptions do apply. You might consider Roth conversions in low-income years to reduce future required RMDs, or required minimum distributions. Another overlooked factor are things that we call stealth taxes, things like your IRMA surcharges for Medicare, Social Security becoming taxable, and then the bump into higher tax brackets after a spouse has passed. So a really coordinated withdrawal strategy can help minimize these surprises.
Yeah. So, another thing that people who are transitioning are going to have to deal with or experience is healthcare. And so if you're retiring and you're not 65 yet, you're going to need to bridge your health insurance some way until you get on Medicare. And so there's options out there, and some more affordable than others, but it is an expense that needs to be budgeted. But going without health insurance is really not an option for most of us, because it just puts too much of our assets at risk that we've spent a lifetime, working to accumulate. But once you're on Medicare, I will say this: the landscape gets a little easier to understand. And Medicare, for the most part, between Medicare and Medicare Supplement or Medicare Advantage, you will have really good health care. And so, but it's also important to understand what Medicare does, and maybe more importantly, doesn't cover. And then another expense that we help clients prepared for is the expense of long-term care.
Yes.
And if there's two of you in your retirement, the chances that one of you are going to need care at some point in your life are pretty high. And so it's important to make sure that either you have long-term care insurance, or you've budgeted for that expense, right? And we've built it into the financial plan to make sure that those things are covered as we get there. But healthcare costs are going to be a consideration.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. On the other side of the financial, there are what we kind of call lifestyle realities, right, that happen in retirement. The first is a kind of identity shift, because retirement is more than just a numbers game. So one of the biggest and most unexpected challenges is a loss of identity. When you realize that you're no longer a doctor or a teacher or a business owner, whatever it was that you were doing, you might find yourself asking, well, what do I do now? And so that emotional adjustment can sometimes take time. So without purpose or structure, it's easy to feel somewhat adrift.
Yeah. And so, Cheri, I think, we're all different. And some of us handle this kind of change, differently. And, I know some people that they enjoyed the lack of stress and the fact that their identity was changing. The positives were so much more positive that they were able to overcome that.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of things are changing when you go through this transition. And, for me, when I first retired, most of my friends were still working. And so, not only did I not have that work persona and responsibility and even credibility, right? It took a little while for, kind of your new identity and your new network of friends and those things to emerge. It doesn't happen overnight, and it has to be purposeful. And I'm still connected with a lot of people that I worked with. I'm not connected with others. But then I have several new connections that I didn't have at the time that I retired, and networks that I've built.
Right. That's great. Yeah. So another thing that really helps is routine building. And you probably experienced this yourself. Creating a routine in retirement, it's essential not just for productivity, but for your overall well-being. You don't need to have a strict schedule, but just a sense of rhythm really can make a difference. Some things that help are volunteering for a cause that you care about, or working part-time or consulting, exploring hobbies that maybe you never had time to try before, or even taking classes just for fun. Structure can help to give your days a little more meaning and momentum.
Yeah. So, definitely there's time to take on some new opportunities. Now, for a long time, I've been on a board of directors for a nonprofit, Junior Achievement of Arizona. And but it's given me more time to focus on that and make a difference there. My wife and I have been volunteering in our church, and so we've had an opportunity to focus there. But then there's also been new opportunities to do things that weren't really on our radar, and things we didn't know we would want to do, right? And so you do get the opportunity to do new things and to reimagine. I think for most of us, we don't reimagine our entire life, but we do reimagine aspects of it and begin to live a little bit different than we did before.
Absolutely. And so kind of tying up the discussion, there are some common pitfalls that you want to avoid. Some of the things that you want to watch out for are spending too much too early in retirement, It's really easy to go overboard in the early years, to be excited and travel. So you need to just be mindful of how you're spending now really impacts your long-term plan. Also, underestimating boredom or loneliness. In your example, you didn't have a bunch of friends who retired at the same time you did. So these feelings can be common, especially if your social life was tied to your career. So it's really important to plan ahead and plan connection, things like pickleball and other ways socially that you have managed to stay involved.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I don't think that we can understate this too much. And so when I retired, my wife was still working.
Mhm.
And so, the house was pretty quiet during the daytime. And, fortunately for me, I like to get out and I like to be active, and I was able to find things to do. In fact, some days seem busier than a work day.
Mhm.
But some days it still was quiet, and it was a little bit boring. But you do have to be purposeful here, because you don't want that to become the norm
Right.
or a new habit.
Right. Absolutely. And then the last pitfall is really not preparing for those healthcare surprises that you had referenced earlier, that unexpected healthcare costs can really derail even the best financial plans. So that's why early preparation and ensuring that your plan incorporates those types of expenses are so important.
That's right. That's right. So, Cheri, I think we've talked about a lot of good things, from the financial side to just the personal side, and we talked a little bit about taxes and the importance of managing those. A lot of us don't realize that sometimes when you retire, taxes are going to be your biggest expense. So
Right.
tax strategies become super important. And so, what I would say to you is, when you retire, you should treat retirement as your new career, and
Mhm.
make sure that you're designing it in a very purposeful way, so that it's really the next best career, or maybe your next best decade. And so, I would say it's okay not to have it figured out on day one. I
Mhm.
don't think too many people do.
Right.
Just like your old career, you didn't have it figured out in day one either.
Right.
And so your new career of retirement may take a little time for you to figure it out as well. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, hey, if you found some value in this video, if you would give us a thumbs up, it'll help other people find these videos as well. Also, if you'd like to talk to someone about your retirement, you can reach us at clientfirstcap.com. And from there, you can reach out to us to have a conversation or schedule an appointment. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter, as well as a link to videos like this one. And so I appreciate your time and attention. And thank you, Cheri.
Thanks, Cary.